Okay, so let's briefly reflect on the goals. So break time's over, pay attention, headphones out, off your phone. So for lesson 2 of unit 4, we learned about a handy way to refer to and talk about a function, and that's called function notation. So really, it's just you'll be asked questions in function notation. You gotta learn like what it's asking about so you can answer it properly. And today we really just did it off of graphs. I like that because you don't have to do any like plugging in at all. But eventually you'll do it from equations, from tables, all sorts of things. But we covered graphs, which is a thing you'll have to do on your test. Answer questions about a graph that are in function notation. So if you can use function notation to express functions that have specific inputs and outputs, so determining what should be the input, determining what should be the output, then great. It always boils down to f of x equals y. So if they give you a number in the parentheses, that means that's your input. If they give you a number on the other side of the equal sign, that's your output. Then you have to like solve and things like that. It always goes back to that. So we know why it exists, so that way I don't have to ask you a long paragraph for one question, especially when it's about different things, different graphs. It'd be a lot easier if you just did it in function notation. And then if you have something in function notation, explain what it means in terms of the situation. So like today we looked at the dog, however many seconds after the owner left was this many feet. You guys interpreted that even when it was in function notation. So that's the main gist. To practice that, and some of you might have already gotten it done, great. Make sure all your practices are at 80% or higher, especially for unit 4. I'll be disabling unit 3. I haven't really done that yet. So if you want to throw in your final submissions for that, you can take some time now and do that. But this unit 4 is your first priority. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about basically the rest of the semester. We got these are basically all of the assessments for the rest of the semester, including finals. So we have the unit 4 test scheduled for December 12th. I don't anticipate that changing. And really, November is almost over, so it's really not like that far away. Highly recommend you come to tutoring tomorrow, go to the Saturday academies, regardless of what your grade is, because it'd be really, I can't think of a good word other than crappy, to like lose a letter grade because of one test toward the end of the semester. Because even when you take that test, like we have a planned retake, but I don't anticipate that there will be any more time to retake after that. So like maybe that last tutoring, that last week of school, and that's it. So you have to make sure that you're on top of it for those 2 days, especially. And then after that, we're just preparing for finals. So like that Friday after we do the unit 4 retake, you'll be having the review for the constructive response part of the final. And that final exam will be given like the week before finals week. And then you take a multiple choice final on final exam day. Now, in my years of teaching algebra, I just learned to like be a little bit pessimistic when it comes to finals, and just like usually kids just don't do well on finals. That's just usually how I think of it. That's what I will tell students so that they can make sure they get their grade as high as they can prior to finals. So say like you just want to have a C and you have a 70%, you've been at 70% all semester. But unless you get a 70% or higher on that final exam, then you're going to lose that 70% and you might fall into a D. Like that semester exam goes in like a different 10% category. So you haven't had that in your grade yet. I just always look at it pessimistically. There's usually a handful of kids that manage to pass it, but most of the kids fail the multiple choice final exam. And aside from last year, that's like all it was for algebra, was a multiple choice final. I really like this constructed response final exam, because now with that added into it, and the way that I give it to you guys, there's even like some extra credit opportunities there. Now I was seeing kids actually improve their grade with the final. But again, I'm gonna be like a pessimistic when it comes to that. Because I don't want you to assume that it'll bring your grade up. All right, just assume it'll bring your grade down. That way, like if I was that kid trying to keep a C and I'm at a 70%, maybe I go to all the tutoring to make sure that I get at least like a 76% or a 77%, whatever will make it more solid, so that if the final brings me down, it doesn't bring me down a whole letter grade. So just saying, we still have some time. That's just me kind of giving you a little bit of a fair warning. Make sure that we're staying on top of it for this last unit, and it's so early in the unit that you can still do that. So any questions? Okay, and same if you've been slacking off in math lab, like some of those math lab projects, assessments, whatever you want to call them. Now's the time to like really start making sure we get those under wraps, because I want you to all have an A in math lab, not really like a C. I think you can all get an A in math lab. All right, but this is main priority today, and then after that, do whatever you need to do to get your grades up. Any questions? Okay.
Question 3. So the distance a person walks d in kilometers is a function of the time t in minutes since the walk begins. Select all true statements about the input variable of this function. So remember, inputs are always independent or dependent. Independent or dependent? Independent, and they both start with in, so that kind of gives you an easy way to remember that. So when we're comparing distance and time, so what is independent? Distance or time? What should go on the x-axis when I graph it? Time. And x is usually time of some sort anyway. That or like numbers of something, like number of days, number of burgers, something like that. So then the other variable is your y, your output. But let's see each of these. So would you say that distance is the input? Okay, no, time of day is the input, right? So maybe let's just double check. So it is time. It's time in minutes. So I wouldn't necessarily time of day, like time of day would be like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. It's just minutes since the walk began. So maybe hold off on that one. What about time since the person started walking is the input? You think no? Yeah, it says function of time in minutes since the walk begins. So I would pick this one, time since the person started walking. Would T represent the input? Okay, why no? Okay, good. So even though we normally associate inputs with X, they might use other letters, but whatever they tell you, if it's also your input, that's it. Okay, so T represents the input. Does D represent the input? The input is not measured in any particular unit. So units would be like minutes, seconds, hours, days, feet, centimeters. So is the input not measured in any particular unit? Is that true? Don't pick that one because it said time in minutes. The input is measured in hours. Is that true? No, because again, time in minutes. And then for each input, there are sometimes two outputs. Would you agree with that? Okay, so we don't know any clue what the graph looks like. All right, I didn't mean to put that one. But can they be, I guess, in two places at once? Can they have two different distances at one time? So then don't pick that one, because it's distance a person walks is a function of time. So we're not saying that for each interval, they could be at two different places, have two different distances. It might be that some of the distances repeat, like they might not travel at all, but for each minute, it's gonna be like a different X, if that makes sense. So there's not for each input, two outputs. So in that case, I would just pick these two, and that's all you should pick. So questions on that one? All right, questions on any others at all from any practice? So maybe just make sure in these last few minutes, because I am gonna start disabling the unit 3 homework. I left it open in case everyone wanted to do it over break, just in case. But I am gonna start disabling those. If you have one that's missing, I don't know, maybe throw in a guess, throw in hit submit. So that way it's something versus just a missing 0. All right, but yeah. Pretty much.